Okay, class, here is me again. You could say that I really like my job. I'm still here. I don't know if it's past 9, but I said I have to help you out with this rite of passage. Uh, I like teaching environmental. I like the environment. I grew up in it with the environment in a very, very kind of natural environment in quotes. I grew up freely in the environment. My dad left me to roam. When I was a kid, I was alone. I was always with the environment. I was much more used to the environment than to people. I think I only got used to people when I was about 12 or 13. Not that there weren't people, there were people about me, but I never found them interesting enough. I didn't find people interesting. So I was either reading or I was exploring the environment on my own. And so I got used to rivers, streams, mists, the fog, birds, butterflies, the woods, and nighttime and exploring. For me, it was a lot of joy. Even up till now, I come out at night sometimes like 2 times. I go to Elms Park, I make a trip around. I check the herons there. And last night, the male and the female heron, they were fighting. They were on the two different ponds there, and they were fighting, and they have this very hoarse cry. And I never heard a cry before. I heard a cry and I had to investigate it. I found out after an hour. And it was pleasing, They knowing like about the histories of wildlife here. We call it wildlife in quotes. Uh, like here of wildcats. There's some wildcats in the neighborhood that were very friendly to me. And they disappeared. And as soon as they disappeared, the raccoons came back. The population of raccoons has exploded because the population of wildcats has fallen. I don't know if the SP, how do we call it, the people responsible for wildlife, if they pick them up in springtime. They were here last winter. They've been here for 2 years, but since spring, I've not seen them. And so the number of raccoons have gone up. The number of rabbits have also gone up. And the rabbits don't come out at day. They come out mostly at night. But now I see some coming out. They're brave enough to come out at day. Maybe because the raccoons aren't around, right? That's interesting. And so you also have the kites that go after the squirrels at daytime. Maybe uh, the uh, the bunnies, they were afraid of the kites as well at day. But mostly, I think also pets. They passed a law that made it mandatory for pet owners to keep their cats indoors and to put their dogs on leash, and that has led to an explosion in the population of rabbits and squirrels. So this is kind of underground knowledge, which I find quite interesting. Some students last year they did a film on a dog park in town. It's a beautiful film. It's on the environment and sustainability series video, environment and sustainability series video on YouTube. I'll send you the link. There are many films there, probably about 45 or more films that students did for the environment introduction to environment class. This time, I don't want it to do films. I wanted to do very good essays on this floor. If the essays are really good, I'll ask Professor Kruger, the head of department for anthropology. He runs a publishing house called WPI Press. If the essays are really good, I'll ask him to have them edited. We have other professors here that could edit them. It'd be very difficult. I could edit them first, but then it's good that an external person sees them from a fresh angle. Because I'm very, very used to you and your work by now. So, yeah, but if the essays are really good, then I'll submit them to Professor Kruger. But they'll need some pictures. They'll need pictures. They'll need illustrations. Actually, publishing a book takes quite a while. It's going to take like 6 months. They will need pictures, illustrations, design, and we'll have to pay for the pictures, or we get copyright free pictures. I'll show you where you can get copyright free pictures for your work. And then design, and then maybe artistic illustration. I think some of you can do artistic illustrations, and if they, for some remuneration, not for free though, for some remuneration. Okay, and so now let me introduce you to this topic. This topic is important not just for environmental studies. It's important. It's one of those topics that enriches your life. You know, it's sociology. It's a topic from anthropology and sociology and psychology, social psychology, but it's also going to enrich. It's a very, very enriching topic, and it's on rites of passage. What are rites of passage? Rites of passage, all of us have gone through rites of passage. All of you have gone through rites of passage. Like when you were a kid and you got baptized in church, that baptism was a rite of passage. You moved from one position to a higher position when you get baptized. You move from one position in society to a higher position in society. And the whole of that baptism, the whole process of baptism, it was a rite of passage. It was like a religious rite of passage where you pass from being non-Christian to Christian. It's bar mitzvah. We have that in bar mitzvah in the Middle East, and also amongst Muslims. They also have a rite of passage. You know, when you read the Quran, then you are able to pass the exam excited, your rank changes, right? Your rank changes. And almost every religion, they have rites of passage. During the rites of passage, you become a student. You become a student. In some cases, you have to leave your family and go to a camp where you learn under a teacher, under a guide who mentors you for a particular period. And then you have to go through an exam. And then when you pass that exam, then you come back to your family. Right? So it differs from one. Also in cultures, if you go to the First Nations peoples and also in Africa, every summer they'll take about every youth that is like has attained 14 years, they'll go to the mountains and live in the mountains for 1 month. They'll carry out circumcision for the boys. They'll carry out circumcision for the boys. They circumcise them in the mountains. And then they will dance. They'll have challenges. They'll be dancing every night. They don't have to smoke cigarettes. They don't have to go after women. No, I think they do smoke tobacco and stuff. They don't have to go after girls. They live a very secluded, harshly controlled life by mentors. And then after 30 days, in some cases 60, they have to carry out a rite. And when they succeed, they go home. As soon as they go home, the community celebrates. They welcome them. Now they are men. They're considered like men. The same happens to women. Previously, I mean, most communities, they will seclude women that have reached menstruation age. They'll seclude them. They will teach them how to handle themselves. They'll teach them how to behave with men. They'll teach them how to behave themselves in society. And then when they come back, they are considered like young women, integrated in society. And now a man could propose to them, could propose marriage. I don't know. So they have all those rites of passage, religion, society, and schools also have them. You have them when you come you move to the dorms, right? There is that thing which boys do, which fraternities do. How do they call it? There's a name for that, I've forgotten. Where the new boys that come, they are introduced, they are piled with alcohol, they are made to dance. I don't know what happens, and sometimes, in some cases, in the US, some have died due to drugs or something. Those are rites of passage gone wrong. So those things usually happen in seclusion. They seclude you in space, and that's where the environment comes in. They seclude people in a sacred space. For religion, it's always a sacred space. Outside of religion, there are secular spaces, but they still matter. They're particular, and then the rite goes through, and then when you come out, then you are integrated back with your family. Those rites, you also have them at school. You come to WPI for 4 years, 5 years, you leave your parents, you come here, you go through these hoops with Achiri, environmental studies, and then mechanical engineering, all of that, you go through all those hoops for 4 or 5 years. And then the day of graduation comes. We have your transcript ready. You have to go to that hall over there. You sit with your class. There in front, up front, is the chancellor sitting, the president of the university. Next to him, the provost. Next to the vice provost, the assistant provost. And I cannot sit there. I actually cannot sit there because I don't have position. So space becomes important in the end day of those rites of passage, the celebration. When it comes to that celebration, the seating arrangements is according to hierarchy. It's strictly hierarchical or sacred. That's where we know who is who. If you're nobody, then you can't see me sit on that stage because I'm nobody, right? So rites of passage become very, very, and it's good when you study rites of passage, when you understand rites of passage and you study rites of passage, you begin seeing how society is structured. We already studied institutions. After institutions, you study structure, how society is structured. And if you want to see clearly how society is structured, go to rites of passage, follow rites of passage. That's when you see who is who. And because the person graduating is becoming a who, that occasion is about promoting that group up into the who is who in that society, right? So they are becoming adults now, right? Okay. So now we look at Camp Mystic as a rite of passage where they take these kids from their homes, they go for holiday camps in this place, and they train them, they mentor them. I don't know, they are there for a month, some less than a month, and I don't know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and some go there every year until they get a certain age. So it's kind of like a rite of passage. The difference is something went wrong in that rite of passage in July 4th to 6th. Something went wrong. If you look at the structure of the rite of passage is a structure in itself. But when you look, it's a structure that is intended to enable these young people to get into a structured society. So it's a structuring process. It structures them to get into the structure of that society. But something goes wrong. A flood. And that flood exposes all the fissures, the cracks in society. It exposes all the fissures and the cracks in society. And so your assignment is examining why did things go wrong? How did things go wrong? And what can be done? What did people feel? What did they say? And what can be done? So essentially, we are thinking of sustainability. It's a rite of passage that became unsustainable because of an external event, right? We usually look at conflict, that there are about 5 kinds of conflict. I didn't revise that, so I might not get. There are about 5 kinds of conflict. Any conflict any novel that you read, any film, there are about 5 kinds of conflict. There is one, humans versus nature. That's one type of conflict. The most basic is human versus human. Boyfriend, girlfriend, father, mother, this, that, job, policeman. That's human versus human conflict. There's also human versus nature. Storm, hurricane, and someone fighting it. And then there is a internal conflict, when you have an internal conflict within yourself, and what's the 4th kind of conflict? I'll get that list and get this. I've not done literature for a long time, so I've forgotten. But I know human versus human, human versus nature, internal conflict, and there are 2 other types. Okay, now with this flood incident, you get all five types of conflict. I believe that you have all 5 types of conflict present. I'll check them out. You have all 5 types of conflict present. So your projects will be dealing with one kind of conflict or the other. If we talk of the use of letters, these students, these young girls, they had this tradition of writing letters to their parents almost on a daily basis. And then the postman will collect the letters so that they don't get homesick. I don't know, it's every 2 days, you can find out. So they write these letters, and then a postman collects the letters and goes and gives their parents. They don't have phones there, so they use mostly letters because those phones will create a crisis. So it's mostly, they're completely disconnected from their parents except for those. They're completely disconnected from their parents except for those letters. Now, some of them send letters the night before the flood. And some of them had sensed that flood, and that's a question. They had sensed it. They sensed that something was going to happen. The counselors dismissed it. Now, you must be very attentive to children. Why am I attentive to children? Because I used to have visions when I was little, and my family became afraid of me, and each time they would stop me from seeing, from talking. So I then kept to myself. That's why I then started going to nature and doing my stuff, because sometimes I would say something is going to happen and they say, oh my God, how could this guy is saying something bad is going to happen, and he doesn't really know what it means. So I just like, so I became very, very sensitive that children might have other senses, sixth senses or more, that they can vision things and see them. Yes, most children do. It's not that I was particular. No, most children, they do when they live in a peaceful environment, when they live in a very, very peaceful environment where we don't have too many influences coming, too many vibrations coming. They can foresee, they can tell things, and some of them have. And in these letters, you will find some of the letters that mention their fears that something is going to happen. And some did say it, and they were hushed. They were hushed down by the counselors. So that's why those letters are important. That letter, that's the first question. I see most of you skipping that question. For me, that's the one that is the most psychic, most intellectual, because it goes against our modern belief systems. Our modern belief system, we don't believe in intuition anymore. We are too analytic. We are too, we don't believe in intuition anymore, right? But there's something like intuition. There's something like a sixth sense, which most of us have lost, but which I believe we can always cultivate. There's another one about bodily sensibilities. Like there are some people that have arthritis and like on the leg, and when a storm is coming, they feel it. They feel it through their leg that the storm is coming. And so there's this embodied way where their bodies, they embody phenomena. They have direct experiences with phenomena. And I have articles. I have a full list of articles which I can share with you. So let's go back to this rites of passage. Rites of passage are very, very important, both in historic and modern cultures. We have rites of passage now. When someone is being made a president, it's the same thing. They have to make a particular day. There's a public holiday. They go to a place where they sit, and they sit in terms of hierarchy and that space. And there is marching by the military, by the bands, and everything is very formal. And the dresses, the way a particular rites of passage. Christians, white. They're white. You cannot dress in red and come to a rite of passage. Graduation ceremony, gown, particular gown, purple or something. From dress to behavior, everything is very solemn. Everything is very solemn. So rites of passage, they are serious occasions. So let's jump now and look at this whole stay at Camp Mystique. Look at the name, Camp Mystique. Look at the name, Mystique, right? It's not by error. And if you look at it, you'll see First Nations, they divide, as soon as they come, they split them into, there are two First Nation groups, two names named after First Nations groups, Tomahawk and something. Again, so pay attention. It's very, very powerful rite of passage. Theoretical framework, rites of passage, values. We've studied institutions, we've looked at some environmental values, communitas, and social reproduction. This term, social reproduction is how do we reproduce society, right? Why is it that in the US today, we are still using the Constitution that was made 1783 or so, in 1786 or 7, that the U.S. Constitution was adopted. The president is still inaugurated the way the president was inaugurated in those days. The way we have soldiers that still march, the military band they march in some of those memorial places, they wear the same dresses. How is that reproduced? We have, if you come in the US, you look at the US system, right? And you look at the Russian system. You have some practices in the Russian system that have been there since time immemorial. You have some practices in the US that have been there since time immemorial. How come? It's through processes of social reproduction, the reproduction of society. How American, and when you are here in WPI, you are also being trained in social reproduction to reproduce the US society so that in 200 years' time, the US society will look the same, will still carry the same values like now. Russian society will still carry the same values like they carried and they've been carrying. Chinese society will still carry the same values that they've been carrying for a century. They continue with those values. We call that social reproduction. And rites of passage, in rites of passage, social reproduction is very important because all the values, symbolic, the symbols of that society, they become very powerful. They're exhibited when there's a rite of passage. They're exhibited very clearly. They're making the president, you see the flag goes up, the band comes out. You know, all the different branches of the military, the police force, they come out. They're giving you a mirror image of US society. It comes out very clearly. If you go to Russian society, it also comes out on that day. Sometimes there's a military, the nuclear weapons march. In church, you see the inauguration of a pope or a bishop, all of those things come out. The material things, what they wear, the symbolic ones, which they don't wear, which you have to be perceptive to see, right? The signs, all those signs that they make, and all of that. The gun salute, the 21 guns, all of those, they come out clearly. And so those are rites of passage. Those are rites of passage. Okay. How the rites of passage came about? It was someone who was called Arnold van Gennep, who after studying society for a long time, he discovered this rites of passage. And he says during a rite of passage, it has a tripartite structure, right? So it has a tripartite structure. There's the rite of separation. In rite of passage, there's a rite of separation. You are taken away from your family, right? You leave the familiar world. There's a liminal space. Liminal space means a space of isolation where you go to be educated, to be mentored until you reach a level where, until you come of age, you reach maturity through that mentorship. Then when you reach that maturity, you are incorporated back to your society. And when you go back to your society, there is a celebration. There's even a celebration before you go back to your society. And when you go back, there is a celebration to welcome you now as an adult, as someone who has changed ranks. And you see that with young people that join the military, right? They go for boot camp. They take them from their parents. They take them out of society. They go into the wilderness. They do boot camp there. And when they shave their heads, they change their clothes. They give them particular clothes and boots. They shave their heads because they show them a change of status, that they have changed it. When they shave you, that hair is all the dirt that you had before you come. They take it off. You are different now. You must respect law and you must respect your seniors. You must respect hierarchy. You must respect law and order, right? They have to change you like the very hungry caterpillar, like the caterpillar before it becomes a butterfly. You have to go through those hoops. And when you graduate, they have to send you back down to your family. You know, when they march, they have to march down. They come with new uniforms and they are saying, yes, sir. Down they're big guys. You see them very cocky now, and, they come home and everyone says, oh, he's changed. She's changed. He's no longer the same. He's very disciplined now. He talks with a manly voice. You see, they have changed. That rite of passage has changed them. They're no longer boys. They're adults. Okay. So there's the rite of these three: rite of separation, liminality, isolation, mentorship training. You go through the hoops, sometimes physical, mental, psychological, torture, everything. They torture you, but they also teach you values. They inculcate those values in your body and your mind, in your psychology. That's why you have to. It's also physical resilience, toughness, all of that. It depends on what, right? And then when you succeed, you change your clothes, you bathe, you graduate, you can come back now to society, integrate yourself, incorporation with a new identity, right? And then Victor Turner, after Arnold van Gennep came up with this tripartite structure, Victor Turner, an American, well, Arnold van Gennep was Swiss, I think. Victor Turner, an American, he examined Arnold van Gennep's concept again and then went to Zambia where he studied rites of passage, where young people in Dembu society, they would take them out of, in summer, they would take them to the hills where they would spend about 3 months going training to be adults. These are young people in 14, 13, 14 years. They train them to be adults, to be men, to incorporate them. And then when they come back, they can marry. They can have a girlfriend when they come back. So he went and he realized that there was this sense of community. When these young people go to that place, they form very strong bonds through the suffering, the hardship, the mentorship, the learning, that communion, that sense of communion. It creates a sense of community so that these youth, some of them, that sense of community persists when they leave, right? And you go to countries in the US, you have that happens. You have some youth that have gone through those rites of passage, like getting into Harvard, getting into Yale. They become lifelong friends, and sometimes you find a government, you find so many of them in one particular government. After many years after they've left school, that sense of communitas is very, very important. So you look at these youths going to that camp, there's a deep sense of communitas in Camp Mystique, that camp in Texas. You are going to read about the graduates. You're going to read about the former graduates that have been there. What's this term they talk for? They used to talk about people that have graduated from an institution. This American term they use for it. You go through all the articles. They talk about the discipline and the connections that they established, the strong sisterly connections that they established there, which became lifelong connections. And some of the elite in Texas, from President Bush's family to a good number of the senators, their families have been through that place. So you look how society is also structured, how those rites of passage, they also structure future, they position people to structure future society. And it was Victor Turner who came with this idea of liminality, and that isolation. When you are in that liminal phase of isolation, you become like a caterpillar. A caterpillar, the caterpillar, a caterpillar that turns to the pupa. You become vulnerable. You can easily die because you are exposed. You are away from your parents. You are under guidance, but they don't know you. You may have a physical condition. They might not know how to deal with it. You are exposed in that liminal situation, that situation of isolation, where you're neither with your society. You're not with your society. You're not with your parents. You're outside of town, in a place with mentors that are taking care of 30, 40, 50 of you. You are vulnerable. And that's why when you succeed and come back, you are celebrated and you feel good. You feel strong with yourself to succeed and come back. You are most vulnerable. In that stage of liminality has to deal with vulnerability. When they say you are a liminal figure, a liminal entity, it means you're in a very vulnerable position. But because of the liminality of those people involved, that's where they build a sense of communitas. They say number gives power. In their numbers now, they have power. Right. Okay, so that's the liminoid. Liminoid means modern elective leisure ritual. Well, we will not go to liminoid. Let's move on. So you look at the rites of passage. State 1, separation, liminality, and incorporation. State 2. You move from state 1 to state 2. Separation, liminality, incorporation. State 2. So here, you finish high school, you go to boot camp, and then you come out and you're integrated in the military. You start with a new rank, right? Non-Christian, you come out, become this. Muslim, you go in, you recite the Quran, you learn, then you graduate, you come out with a new rank. Same with all other religions. African religions, the Dembo ritual, like Victor Turner did, you saw the youth graduate, now they come out with a different rank, now they can marry, now they can have cows, now they can build their homes. And same with university studies, you graduate, you get a degree, now you can, you see, so separation, liminality, incorporation. You are incorporated when you graduate from here. Here, it's a separate place. This institution here, we are separated from society, right? We are separated from society. And when you finish, then you go back to the city. I'm going back home now. I got a job in Florida, so I'm going to get my apartment. You are incorporated, reintegrated into society. So separation, liminality, learning, growing, hardship, and then caterpillar, pupa, and then you become a butterfly, incorporation. You fly back now as a butterfly into society, fully fledged, ready to drink enjoy the juices, the nectar of life, right? So this diagram actually, you move from a neophyte to an adult, neophyte to an adult. I think my image covers adult. Okay, examples, cultural rites, vision quest, and you go to the First Nations peoples, you have vision quest, the Lakota, the Ojibwe, and other indigenous peoples. It's a solitary period in nature involving fasting and prayer to seek spiritual guidance. A solitary period in nature, outside in the wilderness, involving fasting and prayer to seek spiritual guidance, because you cannot get that guidance inside society. So you must go to the hills, the mountain, the woods, where you are direct communion with the universe, and you seek spiritual guidance. The bar mitzvah at age 13 or 12, children assume religious responsibilities in the Jewish community. Okay, the Maasai ceremony, Kenya, marks the transition of young men from warriorhood to elder status. You see that if you can look rites of transition amongst the Maasai, those in East Africa that rear cattle, they wear those red long gowns and spears, and they jump up. They are very, very tall. Maasai generally, I'm too short. I don't think I could. Yeah, so they have these ceremonies where young men became, and they have to spear a lion in the Maasai community to become a young man, be considered as a man. You had to go out and spear a lion. So it wasn't like shooting it from spearing a lion from a long distance. No, you have to get very close to the lion, and then when you do that, then you're a man. If you don't do that, or you can't marry. You go to any girl, they say, no, I'm getting married to you. You can't defend me. You got to go kill a lion. I bet you, because I would rather not marry. I'm telling you, I would rather stay alone. I have my peace of mind. Okay. So you also have walkabout, the Aboriginal First Nations people in Australia, a journey to the wilderness of self-discovery and survival. Often during a journey to the wilderness. Yeah, I know an Australian child that walked. I think that child walked about 2,000 kilometers across the desert. Young child of about 9 or so, 8 or 9, 7 to 9, that walked about 2,000 kilometers. It's unbelievable, across the desert. I'll die if I just have to walk 50 kilometers across it. I'll die of thirst. And then you have this other one, Seijin Shiki, a national holiday celebrated. I've covered the image. So you could check this rites of passage. Just Google rites of passage and you see lots of videos. Rites of almost every society, every religion, every institution, they have rites of passage. I've given you some YouTube clips here, which you can watch. Life cycle. You have, amongst rites of passage, you have birth rituals, naming ceremonies in Ghana, initiation into adulthood, marriage ceremonies, and death rites. Death rites, that's where you see rites of passage become very powerful. When someone dies, everything is ritualized. Everything is solemn. People don't do things anyhow. They dress in black. Some society dress in white, some in red. Flowers. Everything is kind of like ritualized. You can look at, because the person now is, they separate the body, right? They separate the body, they go through those rites, and then they bury the body, so the body gets reincorporated with the ancestral world, or the world of the next world, the spiritual world. You could look at it like the marriage ceremonies, the same. The dresses that people wear, they change dresses, you know. They go to church, they get these teaching mentorships, everything. Then the marriage, they go to the altar, and then they walk down the altar, hand in hand, they put these rings, and then they come back and they say ceremony, and then the day after, they're part of society again, but they're different. Their status has changed. All rites of passage, there's a change in status. There's a change in status in all rites of passage. Okay, so now we also have secular, modern secular rites of passage, like high school or college graduation, military boot camp, fraternity, sorority initiations, driver's license testing, summer camps. Those are other rites of passage that you should be aware of. And then camp mystic as a rite of passage. Camp mystics, little souls were nurtured in Bubble Inn. All the cabins girls and 2 counselors were last lost in the... Okay, so you look at how they were nurtured. How were they nurtured? How were they structured? Faith-based camps like those hit by Texas are a rite of passage for many. So read these articles on how camp mystic was a rite of passage. At the summer camps, kids get a glimpse of their future. That's what made the horror in Texas so visceral. So at the summer camps, kids get a glimpse. You get a glimpse of your future. So what happened to that future? That future got destroyed. So your essays are to examine how that destruction took place. What is it that we didn't understand about the whole process? What is it that we didn't understand about interconnectedness of camp mystic and the river? We have to look at the river, and we have to look at camp mystic. We have to look at upriver, and we have to look at upstream and downstream. We have to look at the composition, the structure of that stream itself. What happened to that stream? We have to look at climate change, because the stream is connected with climate change. We had to look at the weather, our understandings of the weather. Didn't we understand the weather? The weather patterns, were there warnings about the weather? We had to look at alarm systems. Weren't there any alarm systems? We had to look... There's so many topics coming up. That thing, it's a crisis. And once it exploded, the whole society is laid bare. The whole society is laid bare for us to see. It's like the society went to smithereens, particularly when we talk about the passing away of little children, of young children. It becomes even the more tragic because it was their future. They went to that camp to get a glimpse, to be mentored, to learn about their future and to prepare for that future. Instead, what happened was an end to that future, a sudden end one night. Okay, so in that way, there are so many topics coming up. That's why you have so many topics, but they are all topics that are meant to explain this crisis, the crisis of the floods, human versus ecosystem, humans versus nature. What happened between humans versus nature? What happened between humans themselves? What happened between humans themselves? What happened to institutions? We look at economic institutions. The camp itself, the organization of the camp in a river, in a floodplain. Why did they set that camp near a floodplain at the bend on that floodplain? Did the environmental organizations not inform them? Were there no rules and regulations at the county level, at the state level, at the federal level? Why were they not reinforced? Is it due to the capitalist system? Why was there no understanding of the ecosystem, the ecology? There were flood warnings. Some of the dogs ran away. Some of the cats ran away. The birds flew away. Each time before floods, wildlife, they sense floods, and as soon as they sense floods, they take off. Particularly birds, even dogs. So pay attention to the reaction of dogs. Dogs were barking the whole night, right? And I don't know if they were on leashes, and the owners probably they didn't understand. So why? So you see that the crisis now, it exploded the community. All the misunderstandings in the community, they became exploded by this flood crisis. So it's not just a flood, a conflict between humans and nature. It's also a conflict between humans and themselves, humans and the ideologies. Climate change. Okay. Liminality in contemporary leisure. So you look at contemporary leisure activities, you look at camps, retreats, expeditions, and you look at these liminal spaces in those how those liminal spaces. You look at the risks, the role of risks and challenge, because these young people, when they go to that camp, it's also risk, right? It's wilderness. It's by a river. It's risk. It's wilderness. It's by a river. They're out there on their own with these counselors. They're not. So it's a risk that their parents are taking by sending them there. And not many parents would send them. Some parents that will not send their kids. They will not allow their kids to leave their homes and go in such a place. So it's a risk. It's nature. Nature is also involved in this process of bringing up, helping this youth to change their status. So nature is a co-official in the process, because they have to boat on the lake, they have to go to the river, they have to go hiking, they have to do this, they have to do a lot of activities to strengthen themselves. They have to learn how to be independent by boating, paddling the boat, hiking, doing all these activities out there in nature. They have to sleep rough. You look at the birds, they sleep. They have to sleep rough. They have to eat, and the food might not be as the best like in their homes. They don't have to be crying about their parents, crying that I miss their daddy. They say, no, just write a late. So it's nature that they take them out in the wilderness, so that the wilderness helps to build them. It builds them, it makes them strong, it prepares them for a future where they'll be resilient, right? But what happens? Environmental unpredictability can transform liminoid into a true liminality. So it transforms you into a status now where it might be irreversible, where your liminal status is irreversible. Liminal status, it's only transient, it's temporary. It has to last only the duration of the time you're in that camp. But now, when tragedy happens, it becomes permanent. And that's why it's painful. That's why it's painful. And it again involves young people. So Rites of Passage, you could follow this link and check out Rites of so history now of Camp Mystic. It was founded in 1826 in Hunt, Texas, near the Guadalupe River. It was a girls-only summer camp with strong traditions. The cabins had distinctive names like Chatterbox, Not Heard, Wiggle Inn, Bubble Inn, check the names. Structured activities, sports, arts, vespers, tribal competitions. The girls were often divided into tribes, right? Stage 1, separation. Physical separation from home and technology. When that technology struck, there were no cell phones. So that's one of the things. There were no cell phones. Psychological detachment from familiar identities. They're detached from their familiar home identities. Entry into a bounded, rule-governed camp world. Now they're in a world where they are bounded by rules. It's not like home during summer where you can run up and down, you do your own stuff. You are in a camp, you wake up at 6 o'clock, you go bathe, I think, canoe in the river. Everything, I don't know if they bathe with warm water or cold water. You go to the refectory by 7, you eat, and then you go next year, you go here, everything is rigid. It's not like home. So there are rules. There are rules, and they are in groups, different groups, different groups. So it's a rule, it's a bounded, rule-governed camp world where you have to learn and you have to graduate. You have to graduate and get to the next group, the next level, year after year, right? Until you reach the final level when you become 18. I don't know. Find out about that. Stage 2, liminality. Tribal group formation and friendly competition. Chapel Hill Vespers in white dresses. I told you, when you enter that liminal phase, separation, there's a change of dress. Your hair is shaven for military. It depends. And then here they give them white dresses. Chapel Hill, liminality, white dresses, intensive peer bonding. So there is peer bonding, which is intensive and communal living. You cannot talk of privacy again. You cannot talk of your individual, me. It disappears. And that's when that sense of communitas, it comes in. So that me becomes replaced with we, right? Because that's how you will survive the future. In the future United States, that's how you will survive, right? When you become senators or whatever, you have to vote for this senator, and this senator has to defend you. So you're preparing for that future society. Nature immersion activities, swimming, hiking, riverside activities, okay? Nature as co-official. The positives of Mystic Campsite, Guadalupe River is central to camp life. Nature, given its infinite powers and infinite meanings, the Guadalupe River as nature becomes its central to camp life. It offered many advantages of living rough in nature: water, land, cypress trees, fishing, boating, sunset, sitting by the river chatting, standing by the river chatting. There are lots of activities as you read them. Limitations: the threats of Camp Mystic site. The region is Flash Flood Alley. That's another name for that place, Flash Flood Alley. Pay attention to that. Why, given that name, they call it Flash Flood Alley, which means it has a history. Why do people still construct houses there? Why do people still construct houses there when they say it's a Flash Flood Alley? You know, why was a children's camp, a summer camp constructed in a Flash Flood Alley at the bend of a river, of all places? Historical events. Look at the historical floods that have taken place there. There was one in 1927, I think one in 1940 something, 50 something, 60 something, 87, and then 2025. Limitations, threats, environmental hazards as unplanned trials. Question: why were these threats overlooked, unheeded, or minimized? Stage 3, we look at incorporation. Returning home with stories and personal growth. When these young people return home after each camp, they come with stories and personal growth. So, they take these stories to school, right? They tell their mates. It's kind of, they are seen now as a different level. You don't see them as the level when they went on holidays. Now they come back, they're different. They've grown, they're also much more mature, they're resilient, they're tough. They know what it means to be tough, right? Formation of lasting alumni identity. That's the word I was looking for instead of graduate. So you have this lasting alumni identity. The alumni, they become one. When they come out there, they're in touch with each other. They know each other. They know and they support each other. And that can lead to the formation of a political class. That's one of the reasons why you find people in Texas. They're very different from Massachusetts, right? They're very, very different. They come from those fraternities, Camp Mystic and all of that, right? And some Christian, you talk of Christianity, you have to go down south to hear how they talk about. They don't talk very much about Christianity. It's those camps, okay? Integration of ecological awareness into self-concept. Because they're used to the environment, there's also the integration of ecological awareness. But here, the contradiction we have here now is that how come they were not aware of the flood? There were all the signs that were there. What failed? So there's a contradiction. Ritual safety envelope. Safety depends on camp staff, local government, river authorities. Flood warning infrastructure and past funding challenges. So look at the flood warning infrastructure. It collapsed. Past funding challenges. Why were the flood warning infrastructure not funded? The Biden government funded it, but they refused the funding. According to, how Texas is a different place. They refused the funding because they were the Democratic Party, anti-Biden. And so there was no flood warning infrastructure when this flood struck. You're going to see these arguments. You see arguments about Biden, about attacking Biden, attacking Trump, and this and that and this. You're going to see everything. The crisis bears out all the contradictions in society. What I'm interested in is for you to see these contradictions, how floods expose the contradictions of society. Okay, environmental literacy as part of Rite's moral lesson. What kind of environmental literacy is part of the teachings at the camp mystic? Is there environmental literacy? And if there's environmental, what kind of environment? Do they teach climate change? Do they teach indigenous knowledge? They split up the 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 camp mystic participants when they come there into tribes. They give them First Nations people. But do they teach them First Nations names? Do they teach them First Nations knowledge, environmental knowledge? Because they were very close to the environment, which they looked as sacred, particularly to rivers. And they have a lot of knowledge about rivers. Did they teach them, or was it just superficial? Calling it, was it really camp mystic, or is it superficial? Is there something in capitalism that makes the idea of Christianity or mysticism a kind of like fake? I don't know. You have to ask those questions. I'm putting it in very extreme ways so that you can pose yourself those questions. Analytic insights. Camp mystic mirrors Van Genep's rites of passage model. Van Genep. It also mirrors Turner's communitas, emerges in tribal and shared worship settings. Tribal and shared worship. We see songs, they sing those songs. There's the tribal there, the tribal aspect. They assume First Nations names. They get into groups that reflect First Nations. But then they also have the Christian worship. Are the two contradictory? I don't know. Nature shapes the rites on predictability and depth. The whole rite of passage is shaped by nature. The depth of it is also shaped by nature. True liminality occurs when environmental hazards manifest. When an environmental hazard manifests, then you are doubly liminal. You were not only liminal during the rite of passage, but as soon as the flooding came, boom, you are extreme. You are liminal down to the extreme because you are vulnerable. You are isolated. The cell phones were not working. When water appeared, there was nobody to save them. They were alone with water. They were facing water now, a wall of water. And they woke them up at midnight, 2 a.m., sleeping. Little children with sleep in their eyes. And there's water climbing on their beds. There's water rising. And you have one counselor with like 20 children. How will you handle 20 children? Some of them young with their age. They're screaming, they're yelling. What decisions can you make? And what split-second decisions? You cannot even understand what is happening because the water is filling in. Windows are being rammed, broken. You hear people shrieking in the other halls. That's liminality at its most acute, right? That's liminality. That's danger at its most existential. Their lives are bad. Completely. Okay? Then references. So you could go on YouTube. You can spend a few minutes and you read Van Genep. You just check a YouTube video on Van Genep, and also Victor Turner on the liminality, rites of passage. And then you look at the flash flood alley history and Texas Tribune. A lot of your articles will come from the media in San Antonio. San Antonio is just about a few hours from there, maybe 1 hour plus. San Antonio, Houston Chronicle, and there are about 5. I've listed them in your at the top of your questions, and they have a lot of material. But you also see a lot of material online. If you go online, you see a lot of material from different media sources, and Facebook has a lot of material. Facebook groups, not private conversations, but Facebook groups, NGOs, influencer group, media groups on Facebook. You have like conversations that went on for weeks, and some have like pages, lots of material. And almost every topic that you have there, it has a lot of material on online and also on Facebook. So as you go along, look at the camp as a rite of passage, and also we've looked at the river, thinking like a river, which is very often contradictory to how we think, because our thinking is short-term. We think in short-term cycles of profit and gain. We think in short-term cycles of profit and gain. Like look at the camp that was constructed around that river. You look at the people that constructed their houses there, despite the warnings of FEMA, the organization that is responsible for controlling constructions in wetlands and controlling constructions in such areas, in such at risk zones along river banks, particularly rivers that flood. You know, FEMA had warned them, but there's a lot of corruption going on, a lot of issues. But they wouldn't listen, or they would push the corrupt FEMA, or they would blindside FEMA to allow them to build there. And the county probably didn't have any control over whether people build along flood banks, along flood zones, high risk flood zones or not. So look into all that literature and questions of responsibility and the impact, psychological impacts on society and responses. And then all those questions, the materials are there online. Now, get in touch with me if your question is difficult or you can't settle on any question. Just get in touch with me, email me, and let's discuss, or let's go on Zoom, hop on Zoom, or phone me. Let's hop on Zoom and we look into your topic. Don't sweat it out. Don't sweat it out. Go through it, pick your topic. If it's difficult, forget about some of the terminologies. They're technical, and I want you to like see some of to look at these questions like expert questions. I don't want to dump it down on you. So I place it tough. So you see, but I know you work your way through. It's very, very simple. Those questions are very simple. So check on them, pick a question, and then get to me, and let's see how you slog it along. The first draft, let me have the first draft on by the 7th, and then I would give you suggestions, and then you could revise, and then you submit between the 14th and the 21st, between the 14th and the 21st. Then I'll grade it by the 25th. I'll grade it, and that will be your midterm. Oh, midterm is around the 15th. Well, I'll grade it, and that will be a midterm grade. I'll grade it, and that will be I could submit it a bit late. I'll grade it, and that will be a midterm grade. And if the articles are good, if at least we can find at least like 20, I think we could think about having WPI Press to publish it. Okay, I think I'll have to end here, post it to you, and then go home. I'll be going through your questions and posting URLs there of articles that I find online. I'll be helping you post them. If you set up a Google page where you'll be responding to your question, I could also read. If you send me the link, I'll be reading as you're going, and I'll be making suggestions for you to follow. Okay, thank you, and you take care, and God bless you all.